Okay, so in today's video, we're going to talk about, have the millennials solved the affordable housing? So, would you buy a house with your best friend? That's what a lot of people are doing who can't afford to buy a place by themselves and are sick and tired of waiting. Millennials especially are pooling their resources to co-own property. So how does it work and what are the drawbacks? It's one thing to butt heads with your roommate over who took the last White Claw, but when you own a property together, there's a whole lot more at stake. So we're going to get into all of that. But first, if you've been enjoying our content, we would encourage you to hit the like or subscribe button to this channel. Thank you. So even before the pandemic, a lot of people were deciding that they'd rather team up with their friends to buy property together. As of 2019, about 3 to 7% of all purchases actually involved friends buying together. The number of co-buyers with different last names increased by 771% between 2014 and 2021. For friends who plan on buying together, it's essential that they put their respective financial obligations and expectations in writing, especially how much of the mortgage payment each person is going to pay, and of course, how the equity will be distributed amongst the ownership. It'll require that you have some difficult conversations, but when you're combining friendship and finances, a little discomfort is inevitable. So assuming that you and your friend are compatible co-owners, what are some of the advantages of this agreement? The biggest advantage right away is that you can boost your purchasing power. With the combined financial resources of two buyers, it's a lot easier to buy. You'll be able to afford properties that otherwise would be out of your price range. Another advantage is how much easier it will be to get a mortgage. There are a couple reasons for this. First, lenders would far prefer to have two borrowers because that increases the likelihood that they'll get repaid. The other advantage, of course, is that two borrowers are far more likely to pool their resources for a 20% down payment. That 20% figure is important. If you're able to provide a 20% down payment, you'll be able to also avoid the added expense, property mortgage insurance, or PMI. PMI can fluctuate, but it's typically 0.5% to 1% of the home's value. Once you've moved in, you'll be able to split your expenses. As homeowners know, the mortgage payment is just one expense that homeowners are responsible for. When you buy with a friend, you'll be able to split property taxes, maintenance, repairs, HOA fees, and utilities. And those can really add up. So having other people to share the cost will really free up your resources. Okay, so those are the advantages of homeownership. Here are a few of the cons. First, when you're applying for a mortgage, your credit scores are averaged. Lenders will look at the credit scores of both borrowers. If one of you has a significantly lower credit score, that could actually limit the amount that you can borrow. That's why you and your friend need to be transparent with each other about your finances even before you go approach the bank. Another disadvantage is that your friend's mistakes could lower your credit score. If one of your co-owners falls behind on their payments, their credit score and yours could take a hit even if you've been current with your payments. This next one is a big issue. If one of you ever decides to move out, the remaining party would need to refinance, which may not be a possibility depending on their financial situation. The party that moves out could stay on the mortgage and rent their space out, but it might be difficult to get a non-resident co-owner to pay their share of the expenses indefinitely. Another issue with co-ownership is that your debt-to-income ratio will be affected. Even though you are splitting the mortgage payments, you and your friend are individually responsible for the entire mortgage. That means that you'll be carrying a high debt-to-income ratio even though you're financially responsible for only 50% or less of the home's value. If you apply for another loan, your DTI, or debt to income, will appear much higher than it actually is. The other big disadvantage to this is that your friendship could harm your finances or vice versa. Make no mistake, you're combining friendship and money, which is a massive commitment and an incredibly delicate balance. Think of it as if it's like entering into a marriage. because extracting yourself from a home ownership can be as complicated as a divorce. So those are the pros and cons that you need to know. If you've decided that this is still a good arrangement, there are a few things you need to know about the legal framework. There are two different structures for home ownership between two or more friends. One is called a joint tenancy, and the other is referred to as tenancy in common. First, let's look at tenancy in common. With this setup, each person can actually own a different percentage of the property, and it's not limited to two people. For example, you can own 50%, another friend can own 30%, and the last person can own 20%. Even with those different percentages, each roommate would have a claim on the property. The other advantage of a tenancy in common is that new partners can be added to the ownership agreement at a later date. Tenancy in common offers each partner the flexibility to sell or transfer their share of the home without the other co-owner's approval. Obviously, this also makes each co-owner vulnerable to a change in ownership that they may oppose, so you'll need to make sure you have a clear understanding about each co-owner's plans and their expectations. With joint tenancy, all co-owners have equal ownership and must enter in this agreement together at the same time. Joint tenancy does not allow for owners to sell or transfer their portion of the property to anyone else. So here's an unpleasant topic. What would happen in the event that one party were to pass away? In a joint tenancy agreement, the surviving owners would inherit the deceased share of the property. Tenants in common, on the other hand, don't have any automatic inheritance rights. It's a tough subject, but these are the conversations that you need to have if you're going to enter into this kind of a partnership. So now you've heard the pros and cons and understand the different types of arrangements. Here's my advice on how to make this work. First, be honest with yourself about your friend. They might be tons of fun and a great wingman, but how are they when it comes to money? If they have a low credit score or have a habit of spending too freely, this probably is not a good fit. If there's a major repair, will they have the resources to split the costs fairly? You definitely don't want to be the one who has to repeatedly pick up the slack. You can create a contract that outlines who is responsible for what and how much of the home equity each party has. Think of it as the friend equivalent of drafting a prenuptial agreement. Another point you should discuss is the goals you have with the co-owning property. If one of you wants to live there as long as possible and the other one wants to turn it into a rental property, you shouldn't move forward in the hopes that someone will change their mind. So those are the key things to know about how to make this arrangement work. As I said earlier, it's no exaggeration to think of this as just like a marriage. If you are combining your finances and buying a major asset together, you need to be careful. And while it's unrealistic to promise your friend that you'll live there together forever, you should both agree on at least a minimum length of time for this living situation. You should also get very clear on how much each person can contribute in the event of a major repair. You don't want to suddenly need a new roof and find out that somehow you don't have enough money between the two of you to pay for it. So those are some things to consider, but this is an arrangement worth considering, especially if you've been wanting to buy for a while. Okay, until next time, I'm Ken McElroy.